going on, guys? Welcome to my new channel, Maverick Overland Adventures, and also welcome to the second episode of the Maverick Overland Build series, guys. So I've got a lot in store planned for this little thing. If you didn't see the first episode of this build series, we took the stock Pirelli Scorpion ATRs that come on the FX4 Mavericks off of the truck and swapped them for some Pirelli Scorpion All-Terrain Plus tires, and the improvement was drastic. For this episode, we are going to be kind of doing a continuation on working on that general area of the truck, and we're also going to be doing some experimentation as well. We're going to be widening the stance on this vehicle, and we're also going to be adding fender flares to kind of prevent it throwing rocks and dirt and all kind of stuff all over the side of the truck. In terms of widening, there's a couple different options. So you can obviously do a higher offset wheel, which in my case, I didn't want to do, one, because of the financial situation of having to buy new wheels and tires, and two, because I actually really like the stock FX4 wheels that come on this truck, and I like the stock size tire that I put on those wheels. Wheel spacers obviously can be a little bit controversial. Some people like them, some people don't like them. They've got their benefits, they've got their disadvantages. So what we're gonna do is we are going to experiment adding some 2-inch wheel spacers to my Maverick. I've done a lot of research, and from what I've found, pretty much anything lower than a 1.5-inch wheel spacer is not gonna work with the stock wheels on your FX4 Maverick, mostly because the studs that come on these trucks are so long that if you put anything less than a 1.5-inch spacer on, those studs are actually gonna hit the back of the wheels, and the wheel's not gonna seat correctly on that spacer, and it's going to be extremely dangerous and not in a drivable condition. So in order to put a smaller spacer on, like let's say a 1-inch or a 1/2 inch, you actually have to cut the studs. I've seen a lot of people doing that. I've seen a lot of people putting 1.5-inch spacers on, and I've seen a lot of people buying the expensive spacers that you can buy from various companies that have cooling and all kind of stuff built into them. But what we're going to experiment with today is I actually found a link for some 2-inch wheel spacers on eBay from an independent eBay seller, and the link was actually sent to me by one of you guys, so I appreciate you. So we are going to put 2-inch wheel spacers on my Maverick, and we're going to test it out and see how they work. First of all, we're going to see how they look, and then over time filming this channel, we're going to see how they actually perform, if they hold up to the elements, if they break, anything like that. And hopefully all this information is going to be beneficial to any of you guys looking to do something similar to what I'm doing. Now, in the future, I do have plans to put a higher offset wheel on this truck and eliminate the spacers, but for now, the spacers that I got, and I will leave a link in the description for you guys, as well as to the 1.5-inch spacers that this company also makes. They're pretty cost effective. I think they were like $69.99 or something for a pair. So in total, I spent like 150 bucks and change on a square set of 2-inch wheel spacers, which is pretty darn good. It's not bad at all. So this information is definitely gonna be beneficial to you guys that are looking for this kind of information, as silly as that sounds. So anyway, guys, let's get after it. We're gonna go ahead and start by installing the wheel spacers. I've got them in the box right here, and then after we get the wheel spacers on, we are gonna wash the truck down real quick, and then we are going to apply our fender flares, and I think this is gonna look pretty sick, guys. I'm stoked, so let's go ahead and get after it and see what we can do out here to old Maverick. Alrighty guys, so I got the vehicle jacked up, and now before we continue, I am going to touch on just some quick safety stuff because I don't want to be responsible for any of you guys hurting yourself. So get yourself a jack stand, use the jack stand, multiple jack stands are better. Don't drop the truck on yourself, okay? Now also I've got the front wheels right here are chalked on both sides. That way if the truck does come off of the jack stand somehow, you've got some added protection. Also, turn your parking brake on, please. For the love of God, do not drop the truck on yourself, okay? Anyway, so before we get started, I do want to show you guys something. I want to show you guys where you can actually put the jack on your Maverick. So if you take a look here, we've got pinch welds right up underneath where that jack is. We've got another weld here, and you can see how thin the metal is here towards the center of the truck. But as we come towards the rear of the truck, we've got thicker sections, and that's where you're going to want to put your jack stand. If you put it down over here, the weight of the vehicle, especially on heavier vehicles, this is going to crush down and you're going to screw some stuff up. I've seen people even put jacks in wrong spots, like right here, and go through your floor. You don't want to do stuff like that, guys. So put your jacks right where your pinch welds are, right where that thicker section of metal is. Again, for the love of God, do not drop the truck. The lugs on your Maverick are a 21 mil, and make sure you are using an impact socket, a black socket. I know some of you guys are out there using chrome sockets on your impact. Don't do it. Don't do it. I see you. It's gonna blow up and kill you. Don't do it. Impact sockets. All right, so we got our first wheel spacer here, and it is important to note that these wheel spacers, the lug size is actually a 19. But we got the first one here, so I guess the first part of this is we're gonna see if this actually fits. So these are supposed to be hub-centric, specifically for the Maverick, and it's the same as the Mach-E and also some Edge models, is what these are advertised on eBay as. So let's get these on, guys. I don't know what to expect, to be honest with you. You can never really tell with eBay. And they actually fit. So hopefully you guys can see these actually fit perfectly. So they are hub centric as stated, which means that the Maverick does share the hub with the Mach-E, and then also apparently the Edge or some Edge models. I know that they're different from the Bronco Sport. The Bronco Sport has M12 lugs, or studs, I'm sorry, and the Maverick has M14. So that's sick. That's kind of the first hurdle that I was worried about, is if these are even going to be compatible as advertised. But it looks like they are, man. It looks like they are.
Now, real quick, I am going to stop right here, and I do want to make just a quick safety note before we move on. Typically, you're not really supposed to be using an impact to reinstall the lugs when you put your wheel back on the vehicle. Now, as you guys saw, I'll typically use an impact to remove the lugs. There's not usually an issue there, but the issues can arise when you start reinstalling lugs using an impact. Over-torquing your studs can be extremely dangerous, and by doing this, there are many things that can happen. You can warp your brake rotors, but more importantly, you can actually cause fatigue cracking in your studs, which can cause them to eventually completely separate from the wheel spacer or the hub, and causing your wheel to fully separate from the vehicle. Typically what I'll do when I'm reinstalling the lugs is I'll use the impact just to snug them down on the lowest possible setting that it'll go, and then once they're snugged down, I'll go back around in the star pattern and use a manual torque wrench to torque them down to spec, which in the Maverick's case is 148 foot-pounds. And one more quick note too, while we're on the subject, it is always recommended when installing wheel spacers to go back through after about 50 to 100 miles of driving them around, because typically those lugs are going to loosen up a little bit. It is important to go back through, remove your wheels, and check the torque on those lugs holding the wheel spacer to your hub, and then once you put your wheel back on, also checking the torque on the lugs holding your wheel to the wheel spacer, just to ensure that you're not having issues with anything loosening up, which could eventually cause further issues. Additionally, you can also use a little bit of Loctite on your studs to ensure that they're not going to back off. I didn't document any of this very well in the filming process. I was kind of trying to rush through this to shorten the overall length of this video. So unfortunately, upon editing this, I realized that there's some seriously important information that I left out. So let's get back to the video, guys, and continue installing these wheel spacers.
All right, yeah. So there it is with the lugs, and man, it fits. It seats in there nice. Give you a little top down, little side view, but yeah, totally fits. Hub is nice and snug in there. Conical lugs are looking good, man. Looking real good, and you can see on these 2-inch spacers how recessed the stock lugs actually are back in there. So you can kind of see how it definitely looks like a 1.5-inch would fit. I don't know how well this is going to focus, but you can see how much space is there. So it looks like a 1.5 would fit. You might be able to get away with a little bit less than a 1.5, but I think anything around a 1 or less, definitely going to have that stud protruding. So actually, let me show you guys here kind of what I was talking about with that stud protruding. So if you look at the back of the FX4 wheels, there are a little bit of cutouts in here, but not a lot. So if you have a spacer that's too slim, those factory studs are going to stick out, and they're going to impact the wheel right here, and this wheel is not going to seat down properly against the spacer, and it's not going to work correctly. It's going to be extremely dangerous, actually. But these 2-inch spacers, tons and tons of room. Now we're to the point. Let's go ahead and get this wheel on and see how it looks. I'm stoked, man. I'll tell you what, I miss actually having studs, not lug bolts, because for a long time I drove Volkswagens, which have lug bolts, which are a pain in the ass. Perfect, dude. Freaking perfect. Let's go ahead and get our lugs on. The real thing here is we need to see if the studs that are actually on the spacer are going to be too long for these lugs to seat back down. If they are, it's not a big deal. You could always trim them and put your close end studs back on. But you could always get open-ended lugs, excuse me, not studs. You could always get open-ended lugs too. It looks like they're gonna seat down nice and snugly. Yeah, that's nice and snug. That is exactly what I was hoping to see. So if you buy any kind of spacers, whether they're these ones or something else, if you get your wheel back on and you tighten these down to where you think it's snug and you can't turn them anymore, but that wheel is moving on there, you can hear it like clunk, 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 clunk. That means that your wheel is not seated on the spacer. So no matter how much you tighten those lugs down, it's not gonna seat correctly and it's gonna be extremely dangerous. So that's at the point you need to either get open-ended lugs, that way they can actually go down over the end of the studs and not be an issue, or you need to trim your studs down. But it looks like these are good, man. So if you guys have a stock FX4 Maverick, I'm not going to speak for any other trims or you know, Maverick types, because I have an FX4 with the 4K tow package. So if you have that combo, for sure these spacers are going to work for you. So that's sick. I'm stoked, man. God dang, that looks so much better. Looking dead on from the rear end of the truck. That is what the rear end now looks like with that 2-inch wheel spacer and the Pirelli Scorpion All-Terrain Plus tires. Give you guys a little view from the front right there. Little top view. Looking straight down the fender. It looks pretty good, man. It's probably, I would say, on the rears, it probably has like maybe like 1.5 inches of poke out past the fenders, which is going to be perfect because remember, we're going to be putting fender flares on this. So it's not going to look like this in the end, but you can see just looking at it here how much that poke is compared to our other side, which is set inside the wheel well, probably at least like a half inch to 1 inch with those Pirelli Scorpion All-Terrain Plus, because they do have a little bit of side tread, so they stick out a little more than the ATRs that come stock. But yeah, that is so much better. Sick, man. All right, let's go ahead and we'll just do the other back and then we'll do the front real quick. Whew. All right, we got the first front done. There's definitely quite a bit more poke on the front, probably at least 1/2 inch, if not closer to 1 inch more poke on the front than there is the rear, but it looks really good. It's not like a crazy amount. The wheel is turned a little bit, so it's kind of, front is sticking out a lot more than it actually is. But if you look at the back here, it's actually really good. And once we have that fender flare over it, it's going to be perfect. And then we're going to be eventually adding mud flaps. That's probably going to be the next episode we do, some DIY mud flaps. But yeah, actually looks really good, man. Not too bad. Starting to look a lot more like a little off-road mini truck. Now we're going to go ahead and get the fender flares on. So I've got the fender flares straight from Ford's accessories department right here. So I went with this style of fender flare. You've got the option of these, and you've got the bushwhacker style, which are like the big, like super off-road ones that stick out and everything, like people got on their Tacomas and all that. I chose to go with the more subtle design ones. So these are gonna stick out like 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch off the side of the truck, versus having those bushwhacker ones that are gonna stick way off the side of the truck. So those are great if you're doing like high offset wheels. I'm not, so I think these ones are gonna be perfect. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. You need to wipe you know, clean your car, obviously. Having any dirt on this is gonna make the adhesive strip that's on the back of these not stick correctly. And then something else to note too, if you guys look at the labels on the back, if you guys can see that right there, we have an LH and it says rear. So obviously that's gonna be left-hand rear. These are specific to each individual spot on the vehicle because the way the actual clips are gonna line up. And guys, I'm actually gonna switch over to the other side real fast because the lighting's a little bit better over here. It should be easier for you guys to see. So we're gonna do this one instead, and then I'll just do that other one afterwards. So I've already got our retainer clips out. So all you have to do to get these out, guys, is you can see that little indentation there. So when this is pressed in, actually in there holding that liner on, all you have to do is just take a screwdriver and press it into that little indentation there, and then just pop that out, and it opens up like that. So you can see these little prongs here that you're able to kind of squeeze closed. So when this is pressed in, it's going to flare those out and hold them that way, and that's what holds this into there just like that. So pry all these out. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and you can see, if you look in there, you can actually see the little metal hole that's you know, actually part of the truck. So what we're gonna do is, we've got our fender flare here, okay? So you can see that there's adhesive strips all the way around the top part of the flare, and there's a strip on each end. So you can see I've pried the end up. You want to pry just like an inch up, and I like to just make a little crease there so it stays folded over. And the point of that is these need to be sticking out, accessible from the outside of the flare. So when you get this on, you can actually grab the ends of these and you can pull this all the way off to finish adhering it to the vehicle. So get those pulled out just like I have them, have like an inch exposed, and then you can take this fender flare, and we're gonna go ahead and you put it right over the liner that's in there, just like that. All your holes should line right up. So all I'm doing here is taking my fender flare, or my my retainer clip, and pushing it into the hole. Those prongs should close just like that, and then once you have it in the hole, it takes a little bit of pressure. I might not be able to do it one-handed, but essentially you're gonna just push this. You can get like the end of a screwdriver or something, just something flat, and put it on there, and you're gonna push this until it pops in, and you'll hear a clicking noise. So I'm gonna get the rest of these put into place here, and then we'll pop them all closed, and I'll show you guys that. But that's pretty much it, man. Pretty straightforward, nice and easy. These holes back here aren't quite lining up yet, so I might have to do a little bit of trimming with a box cutter or a razor knife, and just do a little bit of trimming back there to get those ones to fit. But other than that, man, pretty straightforward, pretty easy. I'm just gonna take the butt of my screwdriver and just kind of position it on there, and then you should be able to just apply some pressure until you hear that click. And now if you take a look, you can see that that retainer clip is in place right there and pressed all the way in, and that's now adhering that fender flare to the truck. So we're just gonna go all the way around, pop all of our retainer clips back in. All right, so we got that fender flare on. We got all of those in except for that one. Kind of boned that one up there. Not a big deal. You can buy these online or pretty much at any auto shop, so I'll just get another one. So fitment wise, they're pretty decent. Like I said, we're missing that one, not too concerned about it. And then I had to break out our Lord and Savior rubber mallet to get a couple of these in, but overall, man, pretty good. So now all we have to do is peel that adhesive strip off, and then we should be pretty good. So I'm gonna set the camera down here.
And I do want to add just one more quick note here. I did find during the install process that installing the rear fender flares is considerably more difficult than the fronts due to the shorter length of the retainer clips they used on the rear fenders. Once you have the added thickness of the fender flares on there, it's much more difficult and takes a lot more pressure to actually push those retainer clips through. So it could be beneficial to go online and try to find yourself some longer retainer clips like what they have on the front, but it is doable using the shorter stock ones. You just have to push a lot harder, and you have the potential to mess one up like I did.
So you should be able to just come over, kind of pull that fender flare out with your free hand, and then you can pull that that tape all the way off of there, just like that. Make sure you get the ones on the ends. I got that one already, so coming over here, get this one off. All right, and then once you have that tape off, you can just apply pressure nice and even all the way around the fender flare, and that's going to adhere that that adhesive to the vehicle, and then once it's stuck, and you can see here, if you guys take a look, the top of the fender flare is nice and flush, just like it should be. You can go ahead and just kind of apply pressure. I'm just gonna start over here, start on the ends, and just work all the way up and over the top of the fender flare, applying that pressure. Make sure you get a good adhesion all the way down. And there it is, guys. So we got that fender flare on there, and that looks pretty dang good, man. So I'll give you guys a little view here, looking straight down. So we've got probably like an inch, maybe just a little more of poke on the rear, which isn't bad. We're gonna be doing, the next episode we're actually gonna do DIY mud flaps that are gonna come out and take care of that problem on the back as well as the front. So I'm not too worried about that poke. I think the front's gonna be considerably more than the rear, just because stock from the factory, the tires do actually sit flush with the fender. But we'll see how it goes, man. But the back looks pretty good. There's your front view. Swing around here. There's your back view poking out. We'll do a little top down. Not too bad. I am stoked. So for this one here on the other back side, I decided to go ahead and try doing the fender flare underneath the liner, and it did not go nearly as smooth as doing the liner underneath the fender flare. So I definitely recommend doing the fender flare on top of the liner. Otherwise the liner, the holes do not line up correctly. And I actually had to take a razor knife and trim the holes slightly bigger on the liner. The fender flares were perfectly fine, but the liner I had to trim a little bit to actually get the retainer clips all the way through on all 7 of those, and that one's still not quite pushed in all the way. But yeah, definitely do fender flare on top of the liner for the best fitment, like we did over here on this side. You can see the fender flare is on top of the liner. Okay, so working on the front here, I'm gonna show you guys. The front is actually a little bit different than the rear end. So to start off, we've actually got different clips. Same basic principle. They've got this inner part that expands the outer part, and that's what actually causes it to grasp and hold the fender flare in. But you guys can see we've got 1, 2, 3. This is on the door side, and actually while I'm here I'll show you. So the door side, this lowest one actually is the same clip as the rear, but we've got 1, 2, 3, and then there's this entire spot up here that doesn't have any. There is one tucked up in there, but that one does not come out. Leave that one alone. And then you've got one up here. So this entire stretch here that doesn't have any clips on these front flares, there's actually another adhesive strip on the lower part that's going to hold that section on. And then we've got one here, and then we've got one down here. Now there's 1, 2, 3 smaller ones right here. Those ones are not going to come off. You're going to leave those alone, and you're going to leave that top one that's tucked up inside there alone as well. So a little trick, because these main clips are a lot longer than this one single short clip that goes on this bottom part facing the door, actually take that short clip and you can put it up in this middle slot up here that is not part of the fender flare. You can see there's no tab that actually goes to this one. So take that and put that in there, and actually take one of your longer ones that came out of this hole originally and put that right there, and that way everything is going to sit a lot better. The reason for that is with this short clip, getting it back into this one with that liner underneath there is going to be pretty much impossible. It's going to be a pain in the butt. So by putting that long clip in there with that liner underneath the fender flare, it's going to be a lot easier for you. This is the short one that originally was in this hole, so we replaced that up here and put the long one from this hole into the short one, so that's going to fit a lot better. We got one there, and we've got one there. So I'm going to go ahead and start by popping that one in. So this is kind of held in place now, and then we can actually take the these are the inside parts of the clips on the front end. You can see they're a little bit different than the rear end, and then we'll start by just popping these back in. It's going to take a little bit of force to get those back in there, so I'm going to do that here in just a second. That one actually went in pretty good. And that looks pretty good. So that's what your front is going to look like. So the front definitely has considerably more poke than the rear, which I'm not too concerned about. I think it looks pretty sick myself. And like I said, we're going to be doing some DIY mud flaps that's going to take care of that issue. But the tire is turned just slightly to the left, so it does look a little bit more crazy on the front than it actually is. But looking from the top down, we've got probably like 1.5 inches, like between 1 inch and 1.5 inches of poke on the front, which isn't too bad. And then coming back here to the rear, we've got probably only like 3/4 of an inch to 1 inch of poke with the 2-inch wheel spacers all the way around. So I know a lot of you guys out there are probably pretty excited about, you know, seeing this. I've seen a lot of you guys in the forums looking for wheel spacers, and there really just aren't a lot of options for the Maverick available yet. So I'm gonna link these down in the description. If you like how they look, they're super cheap, square sets, like 150 bucks with free shipping, and they showed up to my house in like 3 days. So, I mean, you can't really beat that, guys. It doesn't really get any better. Now, I know a lot of you are probably watching this video and you're pretty adamantly opposed to wheel spacers. It's like 50-50 on both sides. Some people love them, some people hate them. I understand why people don't like them, but like I said earlier in the video, guys, this whole thing is kind of just an experiment to one, see if these things would even fit, which they do, which is awesome, and then secondly, to see how they look, if they even fit on the vehicle in the first place. So we accomplished both of those goals, and then of course putting the fender flares on there really just kind of brings the whole build together. It just looks amazing, guys. So let me know what you think down in the comments. I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're interested in seeing more content like this, you know, following the rest of the build, as well as a whole bunch of other informational content about the Maverick, if you have questions or concerns, or you're waiting on your Maverick and there's something that you just need to know, reach out to me, guys. Subscribe to the channel. There's a lot more coming. I finally have my Overland extrusion bed rack in the mail. It's on its way. So once that gets here, we're going to do the install video for that. We're going to put the rooftop tent on it, which I already have. We're going to do some off-road lights on the front of the truck, and I've got a whole bunch more DIY stuff planned as well. So if that sounds interesting, subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you on the next one.